Chase Ridgway stepped into her path before she'd even set her bag down. Well, look what the wind dragged in. Excuse me. I'm sorry, are you lost? The yoga studio's 2 doors down. I'm the new self-defense instructor. The 3 of them laughed together, the kind of laugh men practice on each other until it sounds natural. Kellen Pruitt circled behind her, slow, deliberate, sizing her up like livestock. Instructor, he said, you look like you'd blow away in a stiff wind off the Bow River. She didn't answer. She picked up her gym bag from where Chase had knocked it to the floor and kept walking. Rule 1, Chase called after her. You don't teach in this gym unless you roll with us first. Or did nobody tell you that, sweetheart? She stopped, turned halfway, said nothing at all. 1 minute later, the 3 of them would understand exactly what silence had been buying. But that was still 2 months away. Before any of that happened, you need to know who this woman actually was, because almost nobody in that gym did, and that was exactly how she'd planned it. Desiree Colwyn was 31 years old, and 4 days before she walked through the doors of Vanguard Fight Co. In Calgary, she had finally landed a job that didn't make her hands shake when she filled out the paperwork. 3 years since her medical release from the Canadian Armed Forces, and Veterans Affairs Canada had moved with all the urgency of a glacier. 4 job interviews. 4 polite rejections. 1 landlord in Bridgeland who took 1 look at the scarring that ran up the inside of her left forearm and suddenly remembered the unit wasn't available after all. She'd ended up in a 1-bedroom walk-up off 9th Avenue with a single window that looked out onto a parking lot and a steel footlocker she kept pushed against the wall under the bed. Inside that footlocker was a small velvet case she hadn't opened in over a year, because looking at what was inside hurt more than not looking. Then Roy Callahan called her. Roy owned Vanguard, a glass-fronted training facility in the Beltline, where junior oil and gas executives paid $400 a month to learn how to choke each other out in a controlled, sanitized way. He needed someone to run a women's self-defense program, 2 nights a week, Mondays and Wednesdays, aimed at survivors, veterans, women who flinched when a stranger stood too close on the C-train platform. He'd found her name through a mutual contact at the Legion. He'd read the parts of her file that weren't sealed. "I'll take it," she'd told him over the phone, and her voice had come out rougher than she meant it to. The IED that took 2 of her section mates outside Kandahar had also taken a piece of her vocal cords with shrapnel. She could talk. It just cost her something every time. "1 condition," she added. "Nobody at the gym knows what I did before this." Roy agreed without asking why. What she hadn't told him was that she needed this job the way some people need air. Because teaching was the only thing that had made the quiet in her apartment feel like something other than a holding cell. So there she was, day 1, standing in the equipment room listening to 3 men laugh on the other side of a thin drywall partition. And she hadn't even started her first class yet. Chase Ridgway was 29, the head instructor, and for 6 years his face had been on every banner in that gym. But a new academy had opened up in Kensington 8 months earlier, cheaper, flashier, and it had been quietly bleeding his student roster dry. He hadn't told Roy. He hadn't told anyone. Men who are losing ground rarely announce it. They just start looking for someone smaller to stand on. Kellen Pruitt was 27, Chase's shadow, a brown belt with more Instagram followers than actual skill, and a habit of filming everything. His lunch, strangers arguing on the LRT, and, within his first 10 minutes of meeting her, Desiree. Weston Blackwood was 31, old money from the West Side, the kind of man who'd been training at Vanguard for 18 months and still couldn't test out of white belt, but whose father's check kept the lights on and the heated floors running. 3 men, 3 belts of varying color, and 1 shared, unspoken agreement. Whatever this new class was, it was beneath their gym. Desiree pulled her black polo over her head. No name tag, no rank, no insignia. Just the word instructor stitched over the pocket, tied her hair back, and walked out to the side mat where her students were waiting. Colette Fairweather was there first. 44 years old, sleeves down to her wrists even in July, having left her husband 9 months earlier and still sleeping with the bedroom door locked from the inside. She'd emailed Desiree the week before with one sentence: "I just want to stop being afraid inside my own skin." Desiree crossed the mat, knelt to Colette's eye level, and pressed a hand once against her shoulder. Colette let out a breath like she'd been holding it since spring. Across the gym, Chase watched. He elbowed Kellen. Kellen raised his phone. Neither of them noticed a 19-year-old kinesiology student named Skylar Nunn finishing her morning jiu-jitsu class nearby, unaware that in 5 days the instructor whose poster she'd had taped inside her locker for 2 years was going to hyperextend her elbow on purpose and call it a training accident. Day 1 was already ending badly. It was about to get worse. By 6 o'clock, the main floor cleared, and Desiree's 8 students filed in, holding water bottles, holding each other's forearms like the walk from the parking lot had cost them something. Colette came first, then Paulette Granger, 40 years old, a former Royal Canadian Navy corporal who still stood like she was on parade even when nobody was watching, then 6 others, average age 45. Average reason for being there. Somebody in their life had taught them precisely what fear felt like from the inside. Desiree was laying out crash pads along the wall when Chase strolled past with a sponsorship rep from a local energy drink company, a man in a quarter-zip fleece with a tablet under his arm. Chase raised his voice for the benefit of the whole gym. "And this over here, this is our community outreach thing. Give back to the neighborhood, you know." The rep chuckled politely. Chase waited until Desiree bent to set a pad down, then kicked it. It slid 4 feet across the floor and caught her shin. "Whoops," he said. "You good, sweetheart. That's not real training. That's more like group therapy." He turned back to the rep. "Honestly, her class is too soft for actual combat. So is she." Colette flinched audibly. Desiree said nothing. She walked over, picked the pad up, carried it back, and set it down exactly where it had been. Then she turned to her class. "Tonight we're doing the wrist escape," she said, voice low and steady despite the damage underneath it. "Because the first thing a bad man does is grab you. And the first thing you do is leave." Kellen had filmed the whole exchange. He posted it that night. "New girl at Vanguard gets a proper welcome from Chase. LOL. 19,000 views by morning." What Chase didn't understand was that he'd just done something in front of a sponsorship rep, in front of 8 witnesses, on a recording that would never really disappear. He'd left a trail. And she was already counting. The second week, Weston walked a pair of prospective members through the gym during her class and stopped mid-sentence to stare at her forearm, where her sleeve had ridden up past the elbow. The scarring there was old and dark and unmistakable, tracking from wrist to bicep. "Jesus," he said, grinning at his guests. "Somebody had a bad barbecue accident, or a boyfriend who finally snapped." One of the prospects laughed. Paulette stood up so fast her chair scraped. "You don't talk to her like that." Desiree put a hand on Paulette's shoulder and pressed once. "Sit. I've got this." She rolled her sleeve back down, slow, unhurried, and held Weston's eyes until his grin gave out on its own. Then she went back to teaching, but Colette saw her hand shake just once when she fixed the sleeve. Nobody said anything. Nobody had to. That night Desiree sat alone at her kitchen table, with the footlocker still shut, and did not open it. Not yet. Week 3, Chase walked a group of men in dress shirts, straight through the middle of her class, uninvited. "Sorry for the detour, gentlemen. Here's our community program. Our instructor doesn't really talk much, vocal thing. Apparently. Martial arts teacher who can't bark orders. Wild, right?" A couple of the men laughed politely. Most didn't. Honestly, too soft for real combat. Too soft to even talk about combat. But the boss likes the optics. Paulette stood again. "She teaches better than you ever will. Sit down before you embarrass yourself, sweetheart." "Sweetheart yourself," Paulette said. "I did 11 years in the Navy. I know a coward when one's standing in front of me smiling." Chase's smile cracked just for a second, and one of the men in the group, older, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, turned to look back at Desiree on his way out, a beat too long, like he recognized something. She filed his face away without knowing why yet. The Friday after that, she came in early and heard Chase and Kellen at the water cooler before they heard her. Told you, it's a diversity hire. City grant, probably. Otherwise, we've got a woman who can barely talk teaching self-defense in my gym. Kellen snorted. It's true, man. This place used to have standards. Now it's Colette, the battered housewife, and a janitor playing soldier. She was standing in the doorway. Kellen saw her first, went pale. Chase turned, saw her too, and didn't apologize. Instead, lifted his protein shake in a slow, mocking toast. Morning, instructor. Eavesdropping's a bad habit. She walked past without a word, sat on a crash pad alone in the empty gym. For 30 full seconds, fists closed so hard her knuckles whitened. It was the only time in 3 weeks her body betrayed her. That night, she opened the footlocker. Inside was the velvet case, a folded flag, and an envelope from National Defense. She looked at all three for a long time, then closed the lid again. Not yet. Soon. Week 4, Chase's birthday party took over the upper deck at Vanguard. Open bar, 50 guests, loud enough to rattle the windows on McLeod Trail. Desiree had finished her last class and was heading out when a student called about a forgotten wallet. She went back inside to find it, and that's when Chase, Kellen, Weston, and 4 drunk friends from upstairs came down looking for entertainment. They spread into a loose circle around her, not touching, just blocking the exit. Kellen lifted his phone and hit live. Here's the deal, Chase said, weaving slightly. One technique. Demo for us. Then you can go. One of the men slow clapped. Weston threw a slow, fake punch toward her face and pulled it at the last second. Maybe she really doesn't know anything, he said, and the circle laughed. Desiree stood perfectly still. Her resting heart rate, if anyone had bothered to check, was sitting around 60 beats a minute. She had crouched in a burning vehicle in Kandahar province while rounds cracked overhead. She knew the difference between drunk men performing for a camera and men who actually meant to swing. These were drunk, and they were being filmed by one of their own, which meant they were also, without knowing it, building a case against themselves. She waited 4 minutes, counted the witnesses, counted the camera angle, memorized the face of the man laughing loudest. Then Roy Callahan came down the stairs, saw the circle, saw the phone recording live, and his face went a color it didn't usually go. What in God's name is happening here? Relax, coach, Chase said, just a joke. Roy looked at Desiree for a long second. Everybody upstairs now. The circle broke. She walked to her car, sat with both hands on the wheel until her breathing evened out, then called a number she'd kept saved for exactly this purpose for 3 years. Renee Castellane, a lawyer with the Veterans Legal Assistance Clinic downtown, picked up on the second ring. Desiree, it's time? It's time. Okay, don't initiate anything. Don't say more than you have to. Starting Monday, wear the camera under your patch. Let them hand us the rope. The following Tuesday, the small clip-on camera arrived by courier. Desiree fixed it beneath her instructor patch, tested the angle in the mirror, and walked in carrying a bag that now recorded everything. Skylar Nunn arrived 5 minutes later with her right arm strapped in a sling and didn't make it past the doorway before her knees gave out and she sat down on the floor, crying. Desiree was beside her in 3 seconds. He did it on purpose, Skylar whispered. I asked him to ease off. He didn't. I heard the pop. He laughed. She held up her phone. 15 seconds of video. Chase on top of her during a joint lock, past the point anyone should have stopped. Skylar screaming. Chase grinning straight into the lens. Caption. College girl thinks she belongs with the big dogs. 300,000 views. My parents can't afford a lawyer, Skylar said. If I report him to the Federation, I lose my scholarship, my dorm, everything. I'm not going to be okay. Desiree picked up the whiteboard marker, wrote 4 words, turned it toward her. You are not alone. Skylar read it and looked up. I have people, Desiree said. Starting tonight. So do you. That night, she texted Renee one line. Bring the cameras. Saturday. Saturday was Vanguard's annual open house. 200 people packed along the upper rail, sponsors, a local sports reporter, 3 cameras on tripods aimed at the main floor. Chase had been promoting it for 2 months. He had no idea the trap had just doubled in size. He wore a fresh black gi with sponsor patches down both sleeves. Weston sat in the front row in an $800 tracksuit, holding a backup phone. Kellen roamed the crowd with his stream open to over 30,000 viewers. Desiree was setting cones for her 3 o'clock class an hour out. Renee Castellane sat in the third row with a briefcase at her feet, a notarized timeline of events, and the camera feed already open on her tablet. Skylar sat beside her, sling still on, knuckles white. Colette and Paulette were behind them. 6 more of the night class women filled the row. Every one of Desiree's people in position on the record. Chase grabbed the mic. Before we start, special guest demo. Everybody give it up for our newest instructor. Come show us what the night class is teaching, sweetheart. The crowd turned. Desiree didn't move. No thank you, she said, voice rough but carrying to the back row. Charity round. Just one technique. Don't be shy. I wasn't asking. He stepped off the platform, crossed the floor, and closed his hand around her wrist, yanking her forward 2 full steps onto the main mat in front of every camera in the building. That was the moment the law finally gave her permission. What happened over the next 51 seconds would be clipped, replayed, and analyzed by strangers on 4 continents. Her hip rotated 3 inches, her left foot hooked behind Chase's ankle. An outside sweep so old it predates the gym's own founding date on the wall plaque, and his grip on her wrist became the exact lever that put him flat on his back, head bouncing once off the mat with a sound that carried to the rafters. A woman in the second row gasped. 3 seconds gone. Kellen lunged in with a clumsy overhand right, phone still in his other hand. Desiree slipped under it like she was stepping out of the rain, was behind him in 2 strides, arm threading beneath his chin, textbook, unhurried. 6 seconds later, he was slapping the mat with both hands, his phone clattering to the floor, still streaming, aimed straight up at the ceiling lights and his own reddening face. 11 seconds gone. 30,000 viewers had front row tickets to it. Weston came in, swinging a wild kick at her head. She caught his leg mid-air, the way you'd catch a grocery bag. Someone tossed you, stepped, twisted, dropped into a controlled leg lock, and simply waited. He screamed once and tapped the mat 4 times in rapid succession. She released him instantly. 23 seconds gone. Nobody in the building was sitting down anymore. Chase was back up, face the color of a stop sign, his gi twisted around his ribs, and came in with a wild overhand swing carrying every ounce of ego he had left. She slipped inside it, caught his wrist, rotated her hips, and dropped him into an arm lock that stopped precisely at the edge of what a shoulder can survive. "I tap, I tap, I tap," he screamed, loud enough that the cameras on the upper deck picked it up from 40 feet away. 51 seconds, total, from the moment his hand closed on her wrist to the moment she let go. She stood, stepped back. 3 men on the mat, one retching, one curled around his own knee, one sobbing into his sleeve. She found Colette in the crowd, found Paulette beside her, found Skylar at the rail with her good hand pressed over her mouth, and gave her one small nod. "I told you, you're not alone." Then she picked up her cone bag and walked back to the side mat to finish setting up her 3 o'clock class, like nothing at all had happened. By 6 that evening, the clip had 11 million views. By midnight, Vanguard Open House was trending across the country. Nobody knew her name yet. In a Legion Hall outside Medicine Hat, a retired master warrant officer named Desmond Ochterberg watched the footage on his phone, set it face down on the table, and started laughing slow and from the chest. "I'd know that hip rotation anywhere," he said to nobody in particular. Colwyn, "Well, I'll be damned. She's back." And in an upstairs office at Vanguard, Chase Ridgway, ice pressed to his shoulder, was already on the phone with a lawyer. deciding he was going to destroy Desiree Colwyn's life. He had no idea how badly that decision was about to fold in on itself. By Sunday morning, the narrative had already flipped. Chase's lawyer filed a civil suit and 3 criminal complaints: assault, uttering threats, reckless endangerment, describing Desiree as an unstable employee with a documented history of violent outbursts, backed by affidavits from all 3 men claiming she'd attacked them unprovoked in front of 200 witnesses. Kellen uploaded a re-edited version of the footage, 22 seconds long, that opened on her hip rotation and ended on Chase screaming, "I tap," cutting the wrist grab out entirely. Caption: Vanguard instructor assaults 3 coaches, charges pending, 14 million views in 6 hours. By noon, Weston had posted an old MRI of a knee injury with a GoFundMe attached. It crossed $60,000 by dinner. By evening, the internet had decided Desiree was the villain. Justice for Chase trended coast to coast. A national morning show host used the phrase "clearly unwell on air" looped over the edited clip. Roy Callahan called her at 8:14 Monday morning. "I have to suspend you, pending the investigation. I'm sorry, Desiree. I tried." "I understand," she said. "Your women are still on the books for tonight. Cancel the class. I'll call them myself." She sat at her kitchen table afterward, staring at an unopened stack of Veterans Affairs paperwork, and called Colette, then Paulette, then the other 6, one at a time. Told each of them the class was paused, not canceled. Told each of them she wasn't going anywhere. One woman, a survivor of a home invasion out in Courtroom, asked if Desiree was safe in her own apartment. She said yes. It was the only lie she told all week. By Monday afternoon, the Crown had filed 3 charges. If convicted on all 3, she was facing up to 18 months. Anonymous accounts online invented a story that she'd been dishonorably discharged for assaulting a superior. A total fabrication that reached 4 million people before anyone bothered fact-checking it. Colette's co-workers at the grocery store, where she cashiered, asked if she was scared of that woman from the gym. She left her shift early and didn't come back the next day. Skylar's parents called her at residence, having seen the edited clip, and asked if she was safe around Desiree. Skylar hung up sobbing. A reporter left 3 business cards under Desiree's apartment door over 2 days. She never answered. Paulette called that night. "They're eating you alive out there." "I know. What's the plan?" "Renee's working it. I stay off social media. I trust the cameras." A pause. "Are you scared?" A longer pause. "I've been scared before. This isn't that." She sat in the dark for an hour after hanging up. Then she opened the footlocker. Inside, a small Canadian flag folded into a triangle, the velvet case holding the Star of Military Valour she'd been awarded for pulling 2 soldiers out of a burning lab outside Kandahar, and a sealed national defense envelope containing her full service record. She laid all 3 on the table, photographed them, and sent the picture to Renee with one line: "Full release. Everything." Renee's reply came back in 90 seconds. "Confirmed. Filing tomorrow. They have no idea what's coming." Renee worked 19-hour days that week. She filed for the original uncut live stream metadata from Kellen account, Jim's internal security footage from the previous 90 days, Chase's social media archive going back 5 years, Weston's medical records, and an access to information request to National Defense for Desiree Colwyn's complete service history. She subpoenaed Kellen's deleted drafts folder and got it. By Wednesday, she had everything. The original unedited feed with the wrist grab clearly visible at second 14. 3 angles of Jim's security footage showing 46 minutes of Desiree's body language before the fight, calm the entire time. Chase's own 5-year social archive, including 6 separate posts where he'd claimed to be a tutor, Canadian Armed Forces veteran, using stolen photographs pulled from stock military sites. Weston's MRI file metadata, dated 2 years before the open house, and a recovered text from Kellen to Weston sent at 11:47 p.m. the night of the fight. "Bro, we gotta sell the knee thing or we're cooked." Renee printed it all in triplicate, color-coded by folder. Then she called Desiree. They built their whole case on 3 lies. Every one of them is going to break on the same morning. Pre-trial hearing Thursday, 9 a.m. Bring the metal. Desiree was quiet a moment. There was a man at the open house, older, gray hair, standing at the back with Chase's sponsors one night, weeks ago. He looked at me like he knew something. "I'll find him," Renee said. "Thursday, 8:47 in the morning, the Calgary Courthouse on 5th Street. Desiree walked through the metal detector in a plain charcoal suit she'd bought 2 days earlier. No metal pinned, no flag, just a steel watch and a manila envelope under her arm. Chase, Kellen, and Weston sat at the plaintiff's table in suits that cost more than her monthly rent. Chase was smiling. Weston wore a knee brace he didn't need. The gallery was packed. Reporters, sponsors, 6 rows of her people. Colette Paulette, the rest of the night class. Skylar with her sling, 2 soldiers she'd served with in Kandahar, and near thy back, an older man with gray hair and a Canadian Armed Forces lapel pin barely visible under his collar. Judge Coretta Vance called the room to order. Renee rose. "Your Honor, the plaintiff's case rests on 3 claims. That my client attacked them without provocation. That Mr. Blackwood sustained a knee injury in this incident. That my client has a documented history of violence. Each of these 3 claims is false, and I intend to prove all 3 this morning. Exhibit A, the uncut live stream, timestamps intact." At second 14, the entire room watched Chase's hand close around Desiree's wrist and yank her forward. His lawyer leaned in to whisper something. His smile faded a notch. Exhibit B, the recovered text thread. "We gotta sell the knee thing or we're cooked." Weston's face went the color of old paper. Kellen stared at the floor. Exhibit C, the MRI file, metadated just prior to the incident. A reporter in the second row whispered, loud enough to carry Takai. "Oh my God!" Weston's lawyer asked for a recess. Denied. Exhibit D, Renee turned to face the plaintiff's table directly. "Mr. Ridgway has spent 5 years marketing himself as a 2-tour combat veteran of the Canadian Armed Forces. He's appeared on 4 podcasts, 2 televised interviews, and used this claim in 31 sponsored posts, accepting veteran-affiliated sponsorships totaling $290,000. She raised a folder. "This is the official response from National Defense to Access to Information Request 2026A-114. It confirms there is no record of any individual named Chase Michael Ridgway, matching this date of birth, ever having enlisted, served, or been discharged from the Canadian Armed Forces in any capacity." She lowered the folder. "Your Honor, Mr. Ridgway has committed stolen valor under multiple provincial consumer protection statutes and is exposed to federal fraud charges. This will be referred to the Calgary Police Service Economic Crimes Unit at the close of this hearing." Chase's face went bone white. The courtroom didn't make a sound. Renee wasn't finished. "I'd like to call my first witness, Mr. Isaac Thorne, assistant instructor at Vanguard Fight Co." Isaac walked to the stand, 38 years old, sandy-haired, Chase's quiet second-in-command for 4 years, and, it turned out, someone who'd been keeping careful notes. "Mr. Thorne, how many times in the past month did you personally hear Mr. Ridgway describe my client as too soft for real combat?" "At least 6. "How would you characterize his conduct toward Ms. Colwyn?" A long breath. "It was harassment. It was racialized, it was constant, and every one of us was too scared to say anything because Chase controlled the schedule." He looked at Chase directly. "I'm done being scared." Renee called her second witness. The gray-haired man in the back row stood. Master Warrant Officer Desmond Ochterberg, Canadian Armed Forces, retired. 26 years of service. From 2011 to 2015, I ran close quarters combatives training out of CFB Suffield. He paused. "Desiree Colwyn was my colleague. She trained the trainers. She held the highest close combat instructor certification, the Forces Award, and she is, without exaggeration, one of the 3 most dangerous hand-to-hand operators I have ever stood beside in uniform." A reporter in the back stood up. Another followed. On the 4th of March, 2020, outside Kandahar, her convoy struck a roadside device. The lead vehicle caught fire. 2 soldiers were dead. 3 more were trapped inside. Master Corporal Colwyn suffered a partial laceration to her vocal cords from shrapnel and second-degree burns to her right forearm. With her own sleeve on fire, she pulled all 3 men out of that vehicle. 2 of them are alive today. He gestured toward the 4th row. A man in his early 30s, a prosthetic leg visible beneath his suit trousers, raised his hand. She was awarded the Star of Military Valour by the Governor General. I have a certified copy of the citation. He handed it to the bailiff, who passed it to Judge Vance, who read it aloud, for conspicuous gallantry and disregard for her own safety in the rescue of fellow soldiers under fire. Master Corporal Desiree Colwyn, Canadian Armed Forces. The room did not make a sound. Chase Ridgway was crying. Weston was studying his own shoes. Kellen hadn't lifted his head in 4 minutes. "Your Honor," Renee said, "with the court's permission, my client would like to make a statement." "Granted." Desiree stood, walked to the stand without notes, without the medal. She looked at Chase for 1 long second, then at Schuyler, then at the judge. 3 words, rasped but clear. "I chose restraint." Judge Vance closed the file in front of her. "All charges against Ms. Colwyn are dismissed with prejudice. Mr. Ridgway, Mr. Voss, Mr. Pruitt, and Mr. Blackwood, you will be remanded for evidentiary review. The matters of fraudulent misrepresentation and conspiracy will be referred to the appropriate authorities effective immediately." The gavel came down. Desiree walked out past 3 men in expensive suits, sitting at a table that had become the wreckage of their own making. The hashtags flipped again by sundown. Justice for Desiree. Choose restraint. Within 72 hours, Calgary police laid fraudulent protection legislation Chase, along with province's consumer perjury and conspiracy. Every sponsorship he had was terminated within the week. The Martial Arts Federation that had certified him revoked his credential publicly. He pleaded guilty in exchange for 18 months of supervised probation, mandatory restitution, and a lifetime ban from holding any coaching certification in Canada. Kellen cooperated with the Crown in exchange for a reduced sentence, 12 months probation and 400 hours of community service teaching at-risk youth, a placement chosen specifically so he'd face, every week, the kind of young people whose pain he'd once turned into content. Weston's family quietly settled with Desiree for an undisclosed sum to keep his name out of further proceedings. The check cleared on a Tuesday, and he moved out to the Okanagan and was never heard from at the gym again. Roy Callahan held a press conference on the front steps of Vanguard on a wet Friday afternoon, no notes in hand. "I built this gym over 11 years. I let it become something I'm ashamed of. I failed Desiree Colwyn. I failed Schuyler Nunn. I failed every woman who walked through those doors looking for something safe and found cruelty instead. I'm selling the gym. I'm leaving the industry. And I'm asking Desiree to accept an apology no words of mine will ever be big enough to cover." He sold the gym 3 weeks later. He sold it to her for $1. She renamed it. The new sign over the front door read 3 words in plain white lettering: "Quiet Hours." She used the settlement money to make every class free for women veterans, survivors of domestic violence, and anyone with a referral from a shelter or a VA caseworker. The night class became the day class. The day class became 7 days a week. Schuyler Nunn, shoulder fully healed within 6 months, became her first assistant instructor, teaching beginner jiu-jitsu on Saturday mornings to a class of 14 women, most of whom cried at least once in their first month, and every one of whom kept coming back. Colette taught the Intro to Fear course on Wednesdays. Paulette ran a military-style ground recovery class on Tuesdays. The night class women became the leadership. Choose Restaurant crossed 2 million tagged posts within 4 months. Women in 19 countries started their own self-defense circles, using the curriculum Desiree had quietly posted online for free, no copyright attached. 6 months after the verdict, the Alberta legislature introduced a private member's bill requiring every certified martial arts instructor in the province to undergo annual background checks and mandatory reporting of student injuries. It passed with support from both sides of the House. The minister signed it standing at quiet hours, Desiree 2 feet behind him, saying nothing at all. She didn't need to. A year on, the gym opens at 6 in the morning. The lights come up slow over mats that are blue and worn soft in all the right places. There are no posters of anyone on the walls. Just one small framed photograph above the front desk. 3 soldiers, smoke behind them, every one of them still alive. On a Tuesday morning, Desiree teaches a beginner class of 12 women. Half of them are veterans. 3 are survivors of domestic violence. 1 is a Crown prosecutor squeezing in ground recovery on her lunch hour. Her voice is stronger now than it was a year ago. The scar on her vocal cords hasn't gone anywhere and never will. But she's built the muscle around it, breath by breath, class by class, until the words come out roughly the shape she means them to. After class, a young woman stays behind to help fold the mats. Her name is Farah Whitcomb, 23, 3 weeks out of a release from the forces, and she's been coming to quiet hours since her second week in the city without telling anyone in the class why. She looks at the scarring along Desiree's forearm and finally asks the question she's been carrying for 21 days. "Coach, where'd you get the scar?" Desiree doesn't flinch. She raises her hand and signs a small, sharp shape, the word fire, the first word she taught herself in the months after Kandahar when speaking still cost too much. Then she lowers her hand and uses her voice instead, rough, clear, steady. "Fire," she says. "And family." Farah nods slowly, doesn't say anything else, and sits down beside her on the mat. They fold the rest of the mats together in silence. On a small shelf in the back office, 2 objects sit side by side. A Star of Military Valour, no longer face down in a drawer, and a body camera, retired now, the lens covered with a strip of black tape. 2 tools, one for survival, one for proof, both still in their own way in service. If you've ever watched someone get underestimated in a room and stayed quiet because it wasn't your fight to pick, you already know the ending before I tell you. The world made Desiree Colwyn prove she deserved a seat at that table before it would even look at her. She never should have had to. Tell me in the comments about someone in your own life who deserved to be seen the way she deserved to be seen on day 1. A coworker, a neighbor, a quiet woman at your gym, a veteran 2 doors down. I read everyone, and if you've ever been told you were too soft for a fight you were actually built for, send this to them. They deserve to hear how that sentence ends.